This week on Real Talk with the Denver 7 and CPR News. Resources stretched thin as Denver's new immigrant crisis grows.
We want to continue to be a city that does not have women and children out on the street in tents in 20-degree weather.
The city turns to service cuts to free up more money to serve newcomers, but not everyone is on board.
They need to keep their hands off of every single hour at the rec centers.
Any kind of cuts at this point would be devastating to our operations.
We break down the pushback against the cuts and how nonprofits are stepping in to help the city with the crisis.
Welcome to Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Heffel.
And I'm Denver7's Micah Smith. Each week in a partnership between Denver7 and CPR, we'll have a real talk about issues impacting underrepresented people across Colorado.
And this week, we're talking about the influx of new immigrants from the southern border in Denver and how the surge is straining city resources. Denver Mayor Mike Johnston says the city has received more newcomers per person than any other city in the nation.
And numbers from the city show Denver has spent nearly $58 million to support about 39,000 new immigrants.
To continue funding shelter sites, providing food and other resources, Denver estimates it will cost up to $180 million in 2024.
After a federal border deal and the prospect of federal funding fell apart, Denver is turning to citywide budget cuts to help offset the cost.
The first departments feeling the cuts are Parks and Rec and the DMV. The most visible impact so far came in mid-February when newly reduced hours went into effect for all 30 of Denver's rec centers. Regional rec centers also now only open 6 days a week instead of 7. Additionally, rec centers will reduce spring programming by, get this, 25%.
Wow. The city has also cut DMV services. All registration renewals are now online, and 5 DMV locations will close weekly on a rotating basis.
Mayor Johnston says all of these cuts will save the city about $5 million and are just the beginning.
While they're the first steps, they unfortunately will not be the last and may not be the hardest. This is a plan for shared sacrifice. I want it to be clear to Denverites who is not responsible for this crisis that we're in. The folks who have walked 3,000 miles to get to this city, and they have asked for nothing but the ability to work and support themselves. And the federal government this week said those folks who want to work in this country cannot be employed by people in this country who want to hire them. That is the crisis.
Mayor Johnston says he has asked every city department to look at their budgets and see where they can cut back.
That request leading to pushback from some, including from Denver's clerk and recorder, Paul Lopez. I spoke to him about why he says he won't be making those cuts. Paul Lopez, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So when did the mayor's office notify you that they would be asking you to make cuts to your budget?
It happened early this year, and it's been an ongoing conversation. This is something that we've been in communications with them even before this latest ask. We were first asked in 24 to roll back on budget, and I explained to the mayor's office then that we have a 4-election cycle. We had 4 elections here in Denver, 3 of which are statewide elections, and including a presidential election. There is a natural uptick in terms of the work that we do and the participation that we have. It's going to be a huge election cycle that we have to prepare for, and we can't cut corners on it.
What was the ask at that time?
Yeah. Well, the ask is, why is your budget at the level that it's at? Why is there a need to increase capital budget, our capital expenditures for security? And the matter of the fact is that we're in a post-2020 environment. Threats against elections facilities and elections infrastructure and even elections of workers are very real. If you don't have to go too far back to realize what happened on January 6th and the events leading up to that. We are working with the Department of Homeland Security and law enforcement to make sure that we maintain a level of security, that folks know that when they participate in the vote, when they come in or they submit their ballots through drop boxes or whatnot, that it's safe, that it's secure, and it's absolutely transparent. And that doesn't come at the risk of accessibility. As somebody who was elected to ensure that our democracy is open and our elections are secure, it's my top priority, is to make sure that the elections workers and the voters that cast their ballot are 100% protected.
And Paul, I think it's important context to add to our viewers and our listeners. For months, you have been saying, I need to increase security. This is before the mayor asked for those cuts. You've been sounding the alarm. Can you just give us a little bit more on that? You touched on it a moment ago, but I just want to make that clear. This is something you've been talking about for months.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, this is something that it's not new to anybody. It's not new to the old past administration. It's not new to the new administration. We live in a post-2020, post-January 6th environment where threats against election workers and elections infrastructure, elections offices are very real. This is something that we work with real closely with the Department of Homeland Security to make sure that we have everything we need to continue to make sure that our elections are transparent, they're fair above anything else, but also they're secure, and that folks who are working to serve the public and making this democracy happen, or even folks who were just voting, can count on the fact that when they're doing it, it's secure and it's safe. We don't take any of those threats lightly, but at the same time, I must say that we are also not going to be bullied or intimidated into not participating.
And Paul, there are some mandates in place as well.
Yeah, none of this is optional. It's not a question. We have to be able to run elections. It is the law for us to be able to run elections that are secure, that are transparent, that are fair and accessible. We have other operations in my office, like the Office of the Public Trustee, recording. These are state mandates. These are things that are required of the county to comply. We have to maintain operations. So that's why we're an independent office, and that's why voters back when made my office independent.
And speaking of independence, this was an ask that you could say no to, which you are saying no. But if you were to say yes, what would these cuts do to your day-to-day operations?
Any kind of cuts at this point would be devastating to our operations. We are still waiting for the security upgrades that we asked for last year. We are still waiting for the office space necessary to be able to run probably the biggest election that we've ever seen in Denver, which will be coming up in November during the presidential election. Any kind of cuts for us, especially without even asking about our operations, without wanting to learn about what we do and why it's necessary for us to maintain the level that we're at, it's just not acceptable. We just can't do it.
You mentioned without understanding our operations. Is there something that you would like to see the Johnston administration do to try to get a better understanding of what you have going on in your office?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there's a lot of very important issues in the city and county of Denver. I served on the Denver City Council for 12 years, 3 terms. Each one of those issues requires collaboration. It requires patience. It requires asking questions. It's my hope that we can collaborate before these major decisions are being made, so folks understand exactly what they're asking for in terms of cutting and where to cut from. Some of us have been at this for a little while and have a little bit of experience on it. It's my hope that we can continue a partnership, that we can continue to collaborate. It's my hope that there are questions asked before there are demands made.
Paul, I feel like you've answered my next question indirectly, but I want to make sure I ask you directly. Is there any area in your budget that you feel you would be able to cut?
At this point, there isn't. We are mandated by the state and federal law to be able to operate. Right? We have to be able to do recordings by state law. We have to be able to maintain office hours as public trustee overseeing the foreclosure processes. We have to be able to run elections at the level that's expected by state law and by the federal government. This is not a year in which anybody should be asking to cut back on elections funding. As a matter of fact, this is something that elections offices around the country are saying, we need more resources so we can protect voters, so we can protect our right to vote, and make sure that our elections personnel and infrastructure is secure ahead of the presidential election. It's post-2020. The game has changed, and the priorities to make sure that folks are safe and that our right to vote is protected are maintained.
All right. Denver clerk and recorder Paul Lopez, thank you so much for joining us for this Real Talk.
Thank you so much.
We're just getting started with this Real Talk on the impact of Denver budget cuts due to the new immigrant crisis.
Coming up, why some leaders are concerned the cuts could have a ripple effect among vulnerable communities. This is Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. Welcome back to Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. I'm Denver7's Micah Smith.
And I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Heffel. Today we're having a real talk about Denver's ongoing budget cuts due to the new immigrant crisis and the impact they're having across the city.
Denver Mayor Mike Johnston announced the cuts in January, saying it would be a shared sacrifice for the city.
Now, one of the hardest hit departments so far is Parks and Rec, with community members saying they feel the impacts of reduced and changed hours at rec centers.
That affects my life pretty significantly because I work an 8 to 5 job like a lot of people. Honestly, I was even more surprised that we don't have enough gyms open before 6 a.m. But 6 a.m. was perfect for me, so it's really frustrating.
So there's a huge downside for those of us who won't have access to the main thing we do for ourselves every day. People here want more access to rec centers, not less.
We also heard from city leaders who expressed concerns over the cuts to parks and recreation and its impact to vulnerable communities.
Here's Denver7's Brandon Richard.
Well, the city's decision to cut rec center hours not going over well with a lot of members of the community, including here in Montebello. We spoke with the community leader here who believes it will cause more harm than good.
Montebello is my home. I live, work, play, and pray here. Have been for over 40 years.
Diane Cooks has spent the last 18 of those years helping families touched by violence through a nonprofit she started.
It started when my son Michael was shot. He was a victim of a drive-by. He was paralyzed from the waist down, so he's physically challenged in a wheelchair.
She wants to spare other families that kind of pain, but says Denver's budget cuts will make it more challenging.
It's going to be more work for us.
She says the rec centers provide a place for young people to go and keeps them out of trouble.
Now I got to get with the partners, the community partners, to figure out what can we do to help our young people and to help families.
Not only that, she feels the city has made migrants a more important priority.
Oh yes, they have made them a priority. And and the families see it, they feel it, they know it. And so that hurts us a lot because we have to think about, like, we don't want them to be out there. We don't want to not help them, but we want to be able to help our own people, our own families, our own community with all the things that we got going on.
Diane hopes whatever the city does next won't come at the expense of the youth.
So we got to make sure they have something to do that's positive.
In Denver, Brandon Richard, Denver7.
Mayor Johnston says the city is doing everything it can to limit the impact of the cuts.
His office told us they continue to explore all options to meet budget needs and expects to refine its projected spending of new immigrants due to several factors, including a slowdown in new arrivals. Mayor Johnston also says the city is looking to save money by closing and consolidating new immigrant shelters.
He says this will save Denver $60 million, which means the city will have to make $120 million in budget cuts to get to that $180 million mark. The city says it's closing 4 shelters in March of this year.
Johnston says it comes as 2,500 new immigrants left shelters in January and February, and that most of them were able to be connected with housing thanks to help from nonprofits.
It's not just housing where nonprofits have stepped in to fill the gap. Their work stretches to every corner of this crisis.
Coming up, we're talking with 2 organizations about how their operations have shifted to help meet the need. This is Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News.
Welcome back to Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Heffel.
And I'm Denver7's Micah Smith. Today, we're talking about the long-term impacts of Denver's ongoing new immigrant crisis.
We've discussed how city resources are being stretched thin, with thousands of new immigrants currently being sheltered and served in Denver.
And that's where local nonprofits have stepped in to help fill those gaps. Now, these organizations help in countless ways, from connecting newcomers to shelter to helping them with legal services as they wait for their asylum claims to be heard in court.
To talk more about this is Marilena Suarez, Executive Director and co-founder of Papagayo, and Jamie Kohler-Blanchard, Program Director of Lutheran Family Services Rocky Mountains. Thank you both for being here today. Marilena, let's start with you. Tell us briefly, who does Papagayo help overall?
Well, we were funded back in 2017. We have been working with vulnerable communities all throughout Colorado. We don't have borders. Our main focus was financial literacy because we have learned that it's a big struggle within our community. Since 2022, we had to kind of shift our mission to be able to support the cause.
And Marielena, I want to stick with you for a second. With the influx of new immigrants coming to the Denver area, how are you meeting them? Are you meeting them where they are? Do they come to you? Can you explain the process a little bit?
We're meeting them where they are. Most of the times we work based off an app called WhatsApp. That's what they use. And to us, that's meeting them where they are, what they use, what they're used to, what they're familiar with, what they trust. So we have been working since 2022 with housing, supporter services, such as RTDs. How does that RTD work? Something as well like SIM cards, connecting them with other fellows, nonprofits. It is about building community and supporting each other.
And I know that you've been working in the past with people from Venezuela. That's a huge part of your organization. And now with the influx of new immigrants coming, they're also coming from Venezuela. And you mentioned to me when I spoke to you earlier about going into the the shelters and going to the areas around where maybe they're in a tent or something and really helping them on the ground. Is that right? And how do you do that? How do you meet people who have come from so far away and say, we're going to help you and get you what you need?
I think what we have learned, and I believe I can speak for anybody that's been doing this, building trust, creating a sense of empathy. I might not know what happened to you, but I'm here for you. And I think that's key, to understand that there is a human being on the other side, to take in consideration that there's a lot of trauma involved. And building that trust, it is so important. If you have trust, then you guys can work together.
Now, Jamie, your organization, this is pretty new for Lutheran Family Services. Will you talk to me a little bit about what you all do just on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so we are a refugee resettlement agency, and we have offices in Denver and in a couple of other cities in the Rocky Mountain region. So we've been doing work with refugees who've been resettled through the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program for decades. And we have experience providing case management and employment services and kind of wraparound supports for refugees and folks who've gotten asylum. And so we were engaged by the city last year to try to help use that expertise that we've accumulated over the past several decades to bring it to help serving these new migrants, mostly from Venezuela, but from other countries as well.
So how do you do that? Because again, you are focused on one thing, which is very regimented, right? The Refugee Resettlement Program is a federal thing. It's very ABC. This is very different with new immigrants coming in that aren't really in the system at all.
Yeah, it's definitely required a pivot and a lot of flexibility on our part. We had no staff at the time, so we had to hire 4 new people to provide these services and really appreciate the work that Marielena and her organization and other organizations in this area have done, and really connecting with them to try to collaborate and try to provide services in a way that is helpful for everyone and is most helpful for clients. But it's definitely been a learning experience for us. It was, while we had the experience to help inform the work, it was still a new population and kind of new systems or lack thereof, lack of systems in place.
And of course, Jamie, this takes funding. I want to make sure our viewers and listeners understand this is hard work that takes money. Marielena, where's the funding coming from for the work that you do right now?
Well, currently from the state, they have been great partners. ONA, the Office of Native Americans, the Rose Foundations. I think none of the stuff that we have been doing would be possible to get done without them. Amazing partners, but as well the community. Moms, dads, local businesses owner, they have been like, how can I help? How can I support you?
And Jamie, is it the same with you because you had to pivot? Are the funds that you're using different than what you normally would be using because you were at a different, sphere before.
Yes, very much. So we were able to get some private funding actually before we got some of the state and city funding, and so we were there. Like Maria Elena said, there are a lot of people that want to help, and so we got some funding to help hire those 4 new staff and provide some direct assistance for basic needs like rent and things like that. But it's been challenging to piece together everything to really fund these wraparound services in a way that is helpful to people.
Is this sustainable? Is this going to be for 3 years, for 2 years? Like, how long can you sustain it without just piecing things together?
For us, and I can't speak for Maria Elena, but for us, we're looking for new funding. We have some pretty good opportunities on the table right now, but what we had was set to run out in June, and so definitely being out there and trying to find what opportunities there are to continue this work.
Right, and this next question is for the both of you. Mayor Johnston of Denver has talked a lot about the migrant crisis. He's the leader of a city where this is really being impacted. The whole metro is being impacted. But if he were in front of us right now, what would you all say to him about the current crisis that we're facing?
I think I would like to say thank you to begin with. I think Denver is doing the best they can. This is all very new to all of us. State, city, nonprofit, city council, everybody's doing the best they can. A couple things that I would like to bring to their attention. We're going to be able to support DPS, other school systems. There's a lot of little ones with all sorts of trauma. What are we going to be doing with them? Are we going to be able to support the teachers that do not have the tools to help our new students? And are we going to be able to provide assistance to those who have gone through things that no human being should go through? The other thing is that Denver is doing the best they can without federal support. Is there any way that we can still push for it? We're not going to be able to make it through without help.
Jamie?
Yeah, I would agree with Maria Elena that the city of Denver has done a lot, and we're so appreciative of all that they've done. But yeah, we need more help. We need more help. There's a lot of folks who need those supports and in schools, mental health, all of those other types of services that people will be needing, that we refer people to and that they need to access to be frankly contributing members and grow to meet their potential, because we believe that immigrants and refugees make our community stronger, and they bring a lot to our community. So let's help them meet that potential.
Maria Elena Suarez with Papagayo and Jamie Blanchard with Lutheran Family Services, Rocky Mountains. Thank you both so much for joining us for this Real Talk.
Thank you.
And that's this week's episode of Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News.
You can find all of our shows on denver7.com/realtalk or at cpr.org/realtalk. Have a great day.